Hello, my name is Greta Harrison. Welcome to Born Fabulous Podcast, Season 3, Episode 11. The theme of this season is young adults with intellectual disabilities living full lives of independence and interdependence. You will hear interviews with parents, support staff, and of course the young adults with intellectual disabilities. Please note these interviews were done 1 to 2 years ago. Achieving independence is a complex journey for many individuals and families. There were many stops and starts with various entities when putting together Season 3. Regardless, this content is very relevant, and we hope you will find it helpful. This episode is the third of 5 parts with Janice Fialka and Richard Feldman. Though they both say they are retired, Janice and Richard continue to be sought-after presenters and speakers on issues relating to disability, inclusion, building community, advocacy, and more. Janice is also the author of 4 books and a poet. Richard and Janice are the parents of Micah Fialka-Feldman, one of the stars of the film Intelligent Lives. Micah has an intellectual disability. It was a real treat to have this in-depth discussion with both Janice and Rich. Now, please enjoy this short clip of Love is a Potion. The lyrics are by Melissa Riggio, a young lady who had Down syndrome and was the focus of episodes 1 through 4 in Season 1. The music and voice are by Rachel Fuller.
Love is everything. Love is all around. Love is a potion. Love is passion. Love is devotion. Love is fusion.
I wanted to ask you about Micah's book. I know he's got a book coming out soon. It was supposed to come out during the pandemic. It hasn't come out yet. Can you tell us anything about that book?
Not a whole lot, except that he's very excited and proud, and he's working hard with a co-author to tell his story. And we feel very, I guess, grateful and respectful that he has this opportunity to share his story, because one is we all want an audience, even if it's just our next door neighbor or a spouse or a friend who says, tell me more. What else? I want to know. I want to see you or hear you or whatever it might be. So just in a general sense, those are a few comments that I would say. Rich might have more.
Yeah, the woman who's doing it with him is a woman who did her dissertation on Micah, and she met with him regularly for an extended period of time, for an extended multi 100-page dissertation. We never talked with her during that entire period, and it's an amazing piece of his early history and questions about his life and his dreams and his hopes and his relationships. So now he's much more mature and she is also much older too. And both of them are really having conversations with the folks from Inclusion Press, because that's who has said they are, tentatively committed to publishing it. And so I think Jack will definitely be nudging them to ask deeper and deeper questions, and we'll see where it goes. We've had a few phone calls with her and him, but they're really continuing to reevaluate how they do it, and the effect of COVID, the effect of college, because his story, other than Janice's book, is not told in his words, through where he's written some articles, without, and this will be an opportunity that will trace it for the last 10 years as well, which is really a very significant 10 years in his life.
But since you asked that question, Greta, I want to emphasize too, in addition to what Richie had just said about the book and the co-authoring, that everyone's story is important. And I hope that your listeners are aware that they, as family members or siblings or as people with disabilities, they have a story that's important to share. One of my favorite quotes comes from the author Christine Baldwin, who says, "Words are how we think, stories are how we link, how we connect with each other." And I think there's a lot of truth to that. So that when someone hears not just Micah's stories, but I mean, in many ways, that's what you're doing, Greta, in such beautiful, important ways, is giving a forum for people to share, because then it clicks with other people. Oh, I could do that, or that gives me the power. So just wanted to emphasize that aspect.
And we had the opportunity to do a family workshop with a group of families in Pennsylvania. And the model of the conversation was to develop PowerPoints for each of the young people that were there. And during that process, the PowerPoints were all about me telling my story.
For each self-advocate.
For each self-advocate. Right. And in the process of doing it, the parents and each of the other families began to learn a great deal about telling the story. And that was one of the most inspiring things I had ever seen, because you saw everyone come alive in terms of their sharing their story publicly, because what has been a private conversation became a public conversation.
You know, and we're really going off on this, but what I'm remembering too was that one of the young people, who was maybe about 18, a wonderful musician, was not verbal, and his story through PowerPoint was developed with his family and with his support staff. And when he went to show it, he didn't use words. He actually stayed in the back of the room, sort of hid behind a chair because he was most comfortable there. And he pushed the button, and there was his story on the screen, right? So we're always reminded of there's so many ways to be in the world. So yeah, stories are powerful.
I love that. When you had that experience with these families, about how many families were there?
About 8 families. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that's a great idea. And that's an idea that maybe some listeners could do.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We did a Friday night, Saturday, and then a Sunday morning. And we, did a lot of storytelling, and then they developed theirs on their own. And, we all of a sudden decided, because you know how movement is important, when you're talking and being together. And so we did the hokey pokey, just the end of it, because you put your whole self in, you put your whole self out, you put your whole self in and shake it all about. And that's what it's all about. And that it really became sort of a theme. We put ourselves in when we want to connect with people. And then we also have the opportunity or the need to pull back as well, that rhythm. So yeah, it is. I think retreats, bringing families together, can be very empowering.
I love that. Was the goal of that retreat coming up with person-centered plans? Was that the goal? What was the goal?
Really to strengthen their relationship, because they were all people that had families that had one person with a disability, usually a young person around 18 to 26. And also to, as Richie always eloquently says, to break the silence, to talk about the joys and the struggles, and to feel a connection with each other. And I think a lot more of it was knowing your story and developing your story and feeling a connection with each other. Does that sound right?
Yeah, and our daughter Emma was there and was very significant in helping to facilitate the PowerPoints and the templates and moving us all around. So that helped a lot for folks and Janice obviously does a lot of PowerPoints, but it was a group situation and a teaching situation. And it's really the movement of I to we. It's really what any of us who are part of the women's movement knows, that it was the consciousness raising and the conversation that broke the silence of thinking you're alone in this either a terrible world that has such injustices or our own pains from the realities in which we have to work with, to turn them into joys and to turn them into something positive.
To turn them into we working towards helping create the world we want to see. Correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that, because I think that's a great idea. Are there any other out of the box ideas, since you mentioned that you all have done with families? Or I know that we've already talked about in season 2 when I spoke with Micah. I can't remember if we've spoken about it in our interviews so far, but we did discuss how Micah came to kind of a stalling point with his circles of support, and then you shook it up and you brought in this facilitator, and you guys, I have, if anybody wants to see, if you go to bornfabulous.com and look on season 2 on Micah's page, I have a picture of this beautiful plan that they drew out for Micah. Well, it's like his journey of his life, really. Yeah. And you had this amazing session where you had like 35 people, right. Many in person, some on computer via Zoom. And you had this facilitator, and that you shook it out of the box to reinvigorate his circle of support, right?
Yeah. I mean, what you remind us of is how important it is to revisit and to reconversation, never use that word, but to reflect, to think about, because no relationship, at least that I know of, stays at, an even keel. It drops off. Everybody has their own lives. And so we need to come together. I mean, and intentionally talk about what's working and what are the gaps. And Micah had a sense that things weren't working as well. I mean, he thought about it. Maybe I need to move back to, our home Detroit area. But it became clear that there was more to it. So that has to, we're back to that place again, where we're meeting with Micah, with each of the individual support staff, to talk about how are things going, is how, support staff needs to also find joy and fulfillment, if you will, in that relationship. So, for example, one of the support staff loved going to the volleyball games at the university and didn't have a lot of people to go to. A lot of people weren't interested, but she asked Micah. So Micah said, yeah, I don't know much about it, but he went. And so it's that reciprocity. It's none of this, as you know, Greta, is one way. So anybody who thinks that they can pull together the circle of support, even if it's large or just a couple people, and think that it's going to glide off, it won't. It just doesn't. And so I think that is a reminder to all of us to come back and reflect and reignite.
And I think part of the challenge of family is to constantly support the expansion of the relationships that our children have or young adults have. And they're doing it themselves, and they're going through changes. So it's this constant changing relationship between where Micah lives and with whom he's living with and in his community. So this reassertion and reimagination of the circle for right before COVID was really an expression of Micah, almost 7 years older than when he started his circles in Syracuse, and more that he now knows many more people in the community than just the university folks. So his center of relationships was changing. So he felt that, and that was really the inspiration and the challenge to us to work with Micah to bring together a facilitator to do a person-centered planning and that mapping you're talking about.
Yeah, and we're always sort of, I bet other parents can relate to this, like on the search for who can we pull into, engaging with our son or daughter, what connections can we make? And I'll just very quickly tell you, I remember we were in Hawaii, and we had presented, and then a mother came up and was talking to us, and she said, "Oh, I have a sister in Syracuse. She's adult and has kids, and she likes to do a lot of volunteer work, and she works at a soup kitchen or something like that." So I'm going, how do I connect this woman to Micah, who's in Syracuse, while I'm talking to her sister in Hawaii, you know? And so I think that isn't always easy for any of us. You know, we tend to be a little bit more outward in our relationships. But I do think that, as I said earlier, the intentionality of inviting people in, and lots of folks aren't going to come, but, you know, my goal is 1 out of 20 have this incredible opportunity to meet someone new and learn something about themselves as well as the other person.
That is so true. You always have to be thinking outside the box, and the wheels always have to be spinning, don't they?
Yeah. You know, I remember when Micah learned that phrase, out of the box thinking. This was when he was in high school. And when he was intrigued by it, you know, and when he would meet people, he'd say, "Hi, you know, I'm Micah. And are you one of those people that think inside or outside of the box?"
He would ask him right off the bat, huh?
Right. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Right to the point.
Right.
That's great. I love that. The raw honesty there. Let's get to the point there.
Yeah.
I wish I could do that.
Let's practice.
All right. So now we've talked about Micah's living situation, and I know that he has a support team. Does he have an actual roommate, or is it more of a support team? And the reason I ask is one of the issues that a lot of families have is, and self-advocates, I don't want to just always say families, is the constant turnover in support teams sometimes. So can you address that with your experience?
Well, you named it. It is a reality. I guess sometimes I'd say it's an issue. Sometimes it's a gift. Micah has currently a wonderful roommate who is a med student, and he was Micah's roommate a couple of years ago, and now is currently his roommate. But he too will be leaving. So each session, if you will, has been about a year. That is a person who receives some compensation for, you know, light engagement, if you will, more natural supports, I guess you could call it. So his rent is covered, and then he hangs out to Micah. They just went to the store together and do some shopping once, and they usually have dinner together, watch TV, or unwind in the end of the day. So that is an issue, is this, and Micah will, I think he's comfortable if we share that, you know, that's a frustrating point for him. He knows that almost every year someone new will come along, because many of them are students, and so they do move on. So I'll let Richie talk about our hope is a design for maybe dealing with some of that.
I think I'm always reminded of Judith Snow from the inclusion folks in Canada, who was the first person to have the money follow her and let her be freed from the institutions in Canada, and one of our mentors. And she had over 600 staff folks and people that worked for her and with her over her lifetime, and outlived many expectations of her. And I say that because I think one of the most painful things is roommates and changing staff, and you know, with the roommate, he's had roommates that have been, you know, have not been good at all, not responsive, not harmful, but just not good, you know, not engaging and so forth. And unfortunately, that's part of inclusion and living, to know how to deal with roommates. I mean, we've all had roommates that are not so good, whether it's in college or after college, or, you know, so that's unfortunately part of it. It hurts to see. Finding a long-term roommate is an interesting challenge. Don't know how that emerges really, but so what we decided to do was, and I think we might have shared some of this, is purchase a duplex, an upstairs and downstairs apartment in Syracuse. And the hope is that he has a roommate that he selects, as he currently does now, but that the downstairs, rather than just renting to students, rent to people who have some care or concern and wanting some level of relationship with Micah. So it enlarges his intentional community beyond his roommate and beyond, different from his circle and different from the neighborhood and different from his staff. So it adds another aspect to relationship. So where he knows there are people that care about him. He can go down there. His roommate's not there for a weekend or a week. He's got some people he's friendly with, and may have dinners, here and there with them and stuff like that. Plant a garden together outside. Who knows?
And I think the reality is, it's easy for me to say this. It's not how I necessarily feel in the middle of the night, is that as family members or friends, that I want to be there for Micah to validate those feelings of sadness and frustration. There is no magic wand. I mean, it may be the reality for a while, longer than he wants or we want for him, that there is that, every year sort of changing. And so we have to make sure that we, I believe, give him the opportunity to talk about that, and also to point out how he's gotten, in a sense, better at identifying what he wants in a roommate. And so when one situation didn't work out well, he reached out to other people and said, who else has had problems with roommates and how did you deal with it? So that's an issue that he could take back to the circle of friends. So I can't make all those things better. Oh boy, do I wish that I could. What I think I'm required or want to do is be able to be there for him, to acknowledge it, and then to find the next steps that allow him to continue to feel some good about his life.
Thank you for listening to episode 11 of Born Fabulous Podcast's third season. I hope you enjoyed it and want to hear more. Some short video clips from most episodes are available on our YouTube channel and on bornfabulouspodcast.com. In episode 12, Janice and Rich will discuss interdependence, different generational senses of security, the positive effects of independence, interdependence, the true meaning of inclusion, Micah's sister Emma and the importance of a sibling's perspective, and more. Please follow and like us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd be honored if you would leave a review wherever you heard this podcast. Now please enjoy this clip of Love is a Potion. The lyrics are by Melissa Riggio, a young lady who had Down syndrome and was the focus of episodes 1 through 4 in season 1. The music and voice are by Rachel Fuller.